All right, man, peace. So Kevin McHale was able to get a sit-down interview with his former teammate and all-time great NBA small forward Larry Bird. Let's see what they have to say. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Exactly. And Kevin McHale had a chance to sit down with Larry Bird. I know you got a Larry Bird story.
I got a lot of Larry Bird stories. Which one you want to hear?
Oh, save those.
Which time you want to hear about him beating me?
Smitty? Well, for me, it's getting a chance to play him. You know, I always watch him go up against Zeke and them. And I looked at him, Sam, I saw you playing against him. I knew he was 6'9", but I didn't know he was that big.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I looked at him as a small forward, Sam, but when I got a chance to line up against him,
Yeah.
I said, this is a big, small forward.
Yeah.
I didn't know that size.
Well, I was just stupid because I didn't believe the hype. I looked at Larry Bird. He wasn't that big to me. He wasn't that fast, wasn't athletic. I thought I could guard him, and then I learned a true lesson about the art of the triple threat.
Absolutely. And that's one of the issues that many modern day basketball fans have with Larry Bird. And to be quite frank with you, it was an issue that many basketball fans had understanding how he could be so great back in the 80s. Please keep in mind that back in the 80s, I was a small child, but I was very cognizant of the rivalry between the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics. My father followed the Lakers as well as being a Knicks fan, and I also followed the Lakers. So, of course, as a small child, Larry Bird is someone that you rooted against. But when you grow into your fullness and you mature as a person, you learn how to respect and understand the greatness of others. And when Sam Mitchell stated that he learned the art of the triple threat, what was he saying? He went up against a player who had mastered shooting, dribbling, and passing. So that kept him off balance defensively. Larry Bird was not going to give you what you wanted. He wasn't going to try to force the dribble to the basket if he saw that your footwork was quick enough to keep up with him. He would stay on the outside and make jump shots and make you play him for the jumper and then blow by you. And then he would keep you off balance with the fact that he could pass equally well with both left and right hand. He was ambidextrous and he was adroit with both passing with the left or right hand. That is what kept his defenders totally off balance. And before you know it, you look at the stat sheet and he has 27, 9, and 9 through three quarters. And yes, I do believe that he's a greater player than LeBron James. Many of LeBron James's fans get upset with that. Is he the athlete that LeBron is? Absolutely not. But as a player, talking about basketball IQ and skill set, he's a better shooter, better passer, and better rebounder. LeBron is a better one-on-one defender, at least at one point in his career, he was. Right now, LeBron is playing worse defense than Larry Bird probably ever played in his career.
Threat.
Well, without talking about it anymore, our man Kevin McHale had a chance to sit down with Larry Bird. Let's take a close look as teammates talk about history.
Bird, little fake, down the lane. Over the backbone! Bird just hit him with a screen, then gets it back to McHale. Larry, a runner.
I was just thinking about, all the stuff that we went through so much stuff together as a team. And
Larry Bird will be so dominant today, especially with the way that the NBA accentuates long-range shooting and has taken away a lot of the physicality, the overt physicality. I think a lot of it has been kind of made up with the fact that the players are faster today and in better condition due to the fact that they've learned so much more about how to improve the human body. Bird will be even better today. He ended his career with about 21,500 points. As most people who know the history of the NBA, they know that Bird's body started to break down on him in the late 80s. Had he been around today with some of the conditioning techniques, he would have easily scored over 30,000 points, 35,000 points even. But his career was directly linked with Magic Johnson to the point where after Magic retired, he no longer wanted to play.
and we played in an era that was really fun.
Bird the rebound. Over his head to McHale.
What do you think the biggest difference is between our era and today's era? What do you like about today's era, and what don't you like? Well, first.
Well, before Larry Bird answers, let me answer. What's better about today's era is the face-up game. The players today can handle the basketball in a face-up situation better than players could back in the 80s, the average player. Back in the 80s, they were much better in the post. Every elite scorer had a post game, whether it was Bernard King, Dominique Wilkins, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Moses Malone, even the guards, Michael Jordan, Mitch Richmond, they all could post up. Players today can't post up. It's a major problem, and it's the reason why teams like the Golden State Warriors are so effective, because once again, everybody plays the same style of basketball. In order to nullify a team like Golden State, you have to slow the game down. You have to make it more physical. You have to post up. A team like New Orleans, had Boogie Cousins stayed healthy, they would have been a problem for Golden State as long as they would have utilized the low post play and slowed the game down. Play them up, take away the three-point shot, make them drive, hope that you have a man at the basket to block their shot. Bring the ball back up. You have Rondo, you have Drew Holiday, slow the game down, execute in the half court, dominate them down in the low post. Try to wear down Durant and Draymond Green, those two mama's boys, and hope that you can get them to snap mentally. There are ways to beat the style of today, but most of these coaches, they're just following behind what the best team does. You can't do that. You can't beat the best team at what they do. And that's what's missing in today's game is the diversity of styles. You have more diverse styles of play back in the 80s. But the face-up game today is much better. Players dribble much better on average than the players did back in the 80s.
Well, first of all, I really like the game now.
And also the long-range shooting today is, of course, much better.
I think they've cleaned it up as far as the grabbing, the holding, the cheap shots. I think they're really on top of it. When you're out there playing, you like to have freedom, and they have that now. Obviously, the three-point shot is stretched out to court a little bit.
Now, you heard what Larry said. He said they've taken away a lot of the grabbing, the holding, the cheap shots. There's much more freedom on the court now. That's his way of saying in a very nice way that this era today would have been much easier for him to play in. Because it was very hard just for a player like him to even get the basketball in clutch situations because of the way that they would grab you, especially if you tried to run the baseline. You have about 2 or 3 guys try to bump you out of bounds or try to hold you and grab your jersey, things of that nature, that they just don't allow today.
A little bit. I can remember when we played, we always worried about the middle was so clogged because we was really trying to pound it downside all the time. But since the three-point line has been taken advantage of, I think it's opened the court up. There's more space out there. And some of the players that have a lot of skill, you can see their skill on a nightly basis.
Mm-hmm. Now, the three-point line came in your first year. My second year was the second year of the three-point line. When did you start kind of like working on your three-point shot?
Kevin, we never really worked on it.
Yeah.
And that's the point that I try to make incessantly on this channel. When people come on in the comments talking about LeBron James is a better three-point shooter than Larry Bird or Michael Jordan, they just didn't do that back then. Now, you can give players of today credit for being better long-range shooters because the style of the game has necessitated that they work on their long-range shooting more. But conversely, you have a guy like LeBron James who had to go out to Akeem Olajuwon's house to learn how to post up. And he utilized the post up for his 3 years after that in Miami, and then after that, he's totally given up on posting up. And that's one of the reasons why the Cleveland Cavaliers are struggling so much is because they're trying to play a young team style of offense when they should be trying to play an older team style of offense and post up and slow the game down.
We wouldn't even guard guys beyond the three-point line. We would stay way underneath, going there every pick. The corner shots and the one out at the top, really top the key, they're the shots that I like to take. I can remember Danny talking about using it back then, and he thought you could shoot 35, 36 from the field from threes and do better if you shot 50%, from the twos.
Well, it's not a surprise to hear Larry Bird say that Danny Ainge was thinking on that level back then, because that's part of what makes him a great executive today, is that he was a forward thinker. That's one of the reasons why Danny Ainge was able to last in the NBA for so long. Danny Ainge, not only did he was he a high-level participant on the Boston Celtics teams in the 80s, he also went to play with the Portland Trail Blazers for a couple of years in the early 90s, got to the finals with them, and then left them and went to the Phoenix Suns and got back to the finals. So Danny Ainge is a player that if they had a role player Hall of Fame, he'd be a Hall of Famer.
Williams diverted again. Up fakes. Fires another three-pointer.
I was laughing because I was in the All-Star game with you when you walked in and asked who was going to get second place in the three-point contest. When you walked in there, what were you thinking when when you made that announcement to the room, just messing with all those guys like you always did? with
Yeah, I
everybody?
didn't. I had no clue. I never really practiced. I mean, me and Danny used to shoot some before we went out there, but
I tell you, Larry Bird got the right name because he damn sure looked like a bird. I mean, like just like a vulture.
there. But everybody's sitting there. Everybody's real quiet. You really didn't. You knew the guys, but you never were around them. And nobody's really saying anything. So I walk in and look around, and it just came out. I had no clue I was going to win it.
Bird against Hodges. Should be very exciting final.
That's just part of the competition.
Craig Hodges was probably the greatest three-point shooting contest shooter of all time. He had the greatest performance in the history of the three-point contest. I think he scored 24 points in an era where they only had 5 tricolored balls. Now you have an entire rack of tricolored balls. But back then he played in an era where they had 1 tricolored ball per rack. And I believe that he hit something like 20 straight shots. One of you brothers can correct me on that. But I'll never forget that. That was crazy.
Competition. It's so much easier, Kevin, to go in a gymnasium and shoot threes and by yourself or a few people around.
You see how he shot the basketball? That's why his shot was so tough to block, because he was 6'9.5", and he took the ball all the way almost behind his ear. Very tough to block his jump shot. Once again, he would have been so much more effective even today than back in that era. So it's silly when guys come on the internet and talk about how Bird would be a backup player today, that he would be Doug McDermott. Larry Bird would be the best passer in today's game, and he'd probably be the best scorer in today's game, because you can't really put your hands on him like you could back then. He was a greater version of Dirk Nowitzki. Imagine a player like Dirk Nowitzki who could pass like Steve Nash.
You get out there and you're right there with 20,000 people looking at you. It's a whole different ballgame. And I knew that going in. I thought I had a great advantage just because of that.
Well, I remember because we were sitting there and you were putting the balls on the rack like you were going to do it. And you remember you told me, you said, it's weird to take the ball here because we always got passes. And
Right.
so, like you were trying to get the feel of getting the ball off the rack. And I think about that because you started practicing a few days before the All-Star game with that three-point contest. I remember because you were saying, I'm going to win this check.
And now Larry Bird. And look at the concentration. He is smoking.
I remember the check was what? It was like
$10 grand.
10 grand. I remember you saying, I'm going to get this 10 grand.
Larry Bird on his way to victory here in the long-distance shootout.
If anybody needs $10,000, I'm sure it's Larry Bird.
You didn't practice on that much.
No, and I know going into that, I remember in the locker room, Robert said something that there's no way in hell I was going to win that three-point contest. So I knew right then I had to win it.
Robert Parrish, one of the more underrated big men of all time. Also a karate expert, if I remember correctly. Big ass 7'2" karate expert.
I was teasing these guys a lot. I told the check had my name on it the last couple of weeks, but it was a lot of fun. You get pumped up for something like this. I'm really surprised I did as well as I did.
Then you won 3 in a row, didn't you?
You won three in a row. Yeah, three in a row.
Yeah, once again, people look back at those scores from the 80s and the three-point contest and they say, oh, wow, they were winning with low scores like 15 and 16. But back then, they did not have that one rack with the all-colored balls on it. And plus today, yes, the players are better long-range shooters because they practice it more. Overall, the players are better long-range shooters. But the best shooters of that era were just as good as the best shooters of this era. You take a Dale Ellis, a Larry Bird, a Craig Hodges, you bring them to today, they could shoot with anybody. Just like if you take a Steph Curry, a Kyrie Irving, a LeBron James, a Kevin Durant, and you transplant them back to the 80s, they would dominate in the 80s just like they do today. It's asinine when people say that such and such player couldn't play today. It's just dumb. If you go from the era of integration forward, the best players are the best players. If Jerry West was playing today, he'd be just as good as Steph Curry. Jerry West averaged 27 a game with no three-point shot. So it is what it is.
The last one was when you had the finger up. You knew that?
For the money.
That's that white boy swag right there.
Were you counting? you knew exactly how many points you had in there.
No, I knew the crowd. I didn't know if I really tied or won it, but I wonder if that thing popped out.
That'd been funny as hell. He put his finger up in the air and the ball pops out.
You'd have done this.
I missed a lot of shots in that round, and I really didn't care what the score was going into. I just knew I had to make shots.
17 to 15 defends the long-distance shootout crowd at Chicago Stadium.
You were so relaxed when you played basketball. There was something about you. You just enjoyed playing basketball. I knew that. But you like to talk, you talk some trash and we did some stuff. But you played intense. But you were just really, where did you get that from?
I have no idea. Kevin, I was so nervous before them games. I couldn't wait till they started. But once I stepped on the court and go shoot layups, everything just calmed down. I was very fortunate that happened.
A lot of all-time great athletes state that. They'll say that they were extremely nervous before the game, or right when it started, that they would calm down. Bill Russell stated that he would literally vomit before every game, not just playoff or in the finals, but even before every regular season game. He got that hyped up for competition that he would throw up before every single regular season game.
There's games out there, Kevin. I tell people, and they don't believe me, but we'd be playing really well. And the press always says, what was you thinking when you made it? I wasn't thinking.
Yeah,
I was thinking about my grandmother, what she's doing today. I was totally out of that arena. I was just playing by feel and flow.
And a similar sentiment was used to be propagated by Bruce Lee. He used to talk about a Zen Buddhist philosophy known as, if I remember correctly, known as Wu Sin. Right? If I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, someone can correct me. Spelled WU-HSIN. And one of you brothers, please look that up. If I'm remembering it wrong, you can correct me. It's known as no mind, meaning that your mind should be there but not be there, so that you can get the greatest benefit out of being in the situation that you're in. Basically, it's just the concept of staying in the moment. You hear many great players touch on that, whether it's Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, even Steph Curry. Bruce Lee talked about it as well. And he utilized that concept in his martial arts while he was sparring an opponent or fighting an opponent or what have you. He believed that that's how you maximized whatever craft it was that you were participating in or that you were trying to perfect. Whatever event you were in that moment was to not be totally cognizant and overly focused on what you were doing, so that you could relax and perform as well as you could.
And people don't understand that, but that's how I did. A lot of times we run a play. I knew what the play was, but my mind might be somewhere else. And they talk about them zones that people get in. That fortunately we got into some, as we get going. And my mind was so far away from basketball, and that happens, and it's unreal, and it don't make a lot of sense, but it's the truth.
All the teams we played on, what was the best team that we had together, do you think?
86,
No doubt about it. The 1986 Celtics were off the charts. The 86 Celtics had the greatest front court, most likely in recent NBA history, because all four of their front court members, Bird, McHale, Parrish, and Walton, could pass extremely well as obviously being very potent offensively.
6, no question, with Bill.
Bird.
Bill made a difference. Jerry Seachy made a difference. And the combination of them two was very good.
That's the team, of course, that swept the Bulls in the first round of the 86 playoffs, where everybody states, I shouldn't say everybody, let me specify, Shannon Sharp, well, if Michael Jordan that good, how come he couldn't beat the Celtics in the first round? The 86 Celtics, one of the all-time great teams.
2 seconds on the shot clock. Bird wants a 3 out of it. He gets it. This is a rarity in sports. I don't think it's ever happened that a celebration has started before the end of a game.
How sweet is that?
Or is a great move to avoid the crush of the crowd.
Our team had an unbelievable ability late to really win a lot of games.
Yeah, execution, playing together, and trusting one another has a lot to do with it.
Double team and Bird. Larry, fake, fall away. Unbelievable. Aims to Bird. He gets a good shot in the shoulder corner. Incredible.
If you can get the ball and get in the right spots to make plays, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, no question. I think there was a joy that you played with. That's why you were fun to be around, because you love to compete and love to play basketball.
Bird's the man they want to have it. Yes, indeed.
Bird, 4-3. Yes! What can you say about Larry Bird?
Well, I like to win, too.
Yeah.
And once again, that to me is what puts him above LeBron James at his peak. It's his ability to make those type of clutch shots. Now, LeBron is a little bit underrated in regards to his clutchness because he does tend to freeze up in big moments, or I should say he had a period in his career, I'd say from about 2007 all the way to 2011, where he would freeze up in big moments. And that's where Bird separates from him, in my view, because Bird actually got better in those moments. So, I mean, it's close. If someone were to say that they believe that LeBron is better than Bird, to me that's debatable, but it's certainly not something that is not something that is unbelievable. It does bear credence. LeBron brings a lot to the table. He's a great scorer, great passer, even though he's a little bit overrated as a passer because he does turn the ball over a lot. But the thing is that he's unable to play in an offense that does not revolve around him. He's unable to play in a system that's not the LeBron James system, and we saw that in 2011. That's one of the reasons why he was so ineffective in pressure moments against Dallas, because everything wasn't running through him. He didn't know what to do when he didn't have the ball. He just sat there and looked at D. Wade. He didn't know how to move without the ball, and then he lost rhythm and he lost confidence. Players like Bird can give the ball up to a Dennis Johnson, to a Kevin McHale, a Robert Parrish, a Danny Ainge. Go on the weak side, move without the ball, cut, make layups, make great passes, long-range shots. That's the difference.
Too, I like the outcome when you win. There's nothing better going on the road. I don't care who you're playing to get that win on the road.
Yeah.
We always felt we were going to win at home, but going on the road, beating anyone, us getting on that bus and talking about the game, and I always thought that was the greatest. I've been very fortunate I've been able to go the full circle, and it's been nothing but a learning experience. I've been very grateful to the NBA for everything that they've done for me. And I just hope everybody gets an opportunity to do it, because playing's different than coaching's different from being a GM. But I've been able to have a little success in every one of them.
Nothing was as fun as playing, though, was it?
No, playing, having the ball in your hands and getting yourself mentally prepared for each game, that was the ultimate.
Yeah.
And Larry Bird, by the way, just to give a little background on him, he came from a household where his father suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder from being in the military, and ended up taking his own life. Now, the effect that had on Larry Bird, who knows, that may have caused some fragmentation in his mind. Originally, he did try to go to Indiana University to play under Bob Knight, who has a background in associated with the military. Bob Knight also was the Svengali, the guru of Mr. Mike Krzyzewski, who was one of his main proteges. And it's possible that Larry Bird was being forwarded to Bob Knight because Bob Knight had a certain understanding of how to manipulate star players like that due to having a certain training in MK handling, etc. As I tell you, brothers, you're going to come to find that many of the top coaches in college and professional sports, they understand how to manipulate people mentally, psychologically. And many of them have a military background. Bob Knight, I believe, coached with Army. And if I'm wrong about that, I know it's one of the military branches, but if I'm wrong about that, one of you brothers can correct me. And I know that Mike Krzyzewski was one of his proteges. Now, Magic Johnson, as we know, was ferried through Michigan State. He played for, if I remember correctly, Mr. Judd Heathcote. And Michigan State, even though it's in the news now for the Olympic coach, Larry Nassar, molesting the girls, they have a long history of being involved directly with the CIA. I believe that they were at the front university for something called the Vietnam Project. But that's another video for another day. But the CIA has always been closely associated with Michigan State.
Had a lot of fun, didn't we?
A lot of fun.
Man, that was awesome to see two Hall of Famers talk about history and playing together. But
It was awesome to you, but it was scary to me. To see those two guys together.
Also, please keep in mind that Isaiah Thomas also played under Bob Knight.
that scared me.
You should bring back Nightmare on Swing.
Yeah, that I don't want to see them. I have no good memories about those two together.
Well, listening to Larry, it's the 30-year anniversary of him winning 3 in a row at the three-point contest. Larry Bird, a three-point shooter. Is that mine? Let's go to you first, Mitty.
I'm not surprised about that. He was a great shooter. But like he stated, they just did not accentuate that shot back then because they believed that why stand outside at long range like that and take those long three-point shots when the mindset was to pound it inside or get as close as possible. You know? But like I've been telling many of you brothers, always keep in mind and be cognizant of the MK handling angle. Once again, Larry Bird was going to play for Mr. Bob Knight, but he couldn't deal with it. He did not like the surroundings. He kind of got skittish with the amount of people that were at Indiana University, so he left. He ended up playing for Indiana State, after which he posed on the cover of Sports Illustrated, utilizing the finger of Harpocrates. So were Larry Bird and Magic Johnson linked or put under some sort of twinning programming, some sort of mirror programming where they were meant to act as the opposite ends of the spectrum of each other? Who knows? But we do know that Isaiah Thomas went through Indiana University, played for Mr. Bob Knight, and then came to the Detroit Pistons, where eventually he was coached by former CIA associate Chuck Daly. All right, so as I always tell you, brothers, everything is connected.
You know what, for me is, watching him win and the fashion he did it. We've watched people win different type of three-point contests, but to be able to hold your finger up, no expression from you, Sam, is he?
Yes.
Yeah. Kept your jacket on. Like I said, he just disrespected everybody. So that's the part I looked at and said it made people start saying that Larry is the truth, the way and the fashion he wanted. So,
yeah, a lot of times it's only at the end of a player's career that you start to understand. But, particularly if you're in an immature state, if you're adolescent or what have you, that you approach things emotionally. But as you grow into manhood, hopefully you do anyway, you start to evaluate things from a much more pragmatic perspective. And that in that way is when you can appreciate greatness more. And look, I'm not saying that all of these guys are monarch athletes, all the star players, I should say. I'm not saying necessarily that Isaiah Thomas and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson are all monarch athletes, but many of the most prominent athletes are. And even if they were not subjected to quote-unquote satanic ritual abuse as children, the methodology of utilizing MK handling techniques over people in general is always pertinent when you're trying to guide people to a certain goal. And that's why you will certainly see the preponderance of coaches who were associated with the military constantly exhibiting their quote-unquote skills, whether it's in football, basketball, baseball, etc. You'll see that a lot, whether it's Coach Belichick, Bill Parcells, Chuck Daly, etc., Bob Knight, Mike Krzyzewski. The list goes on and on.
Sam?
Well, for people that talk about Larry didn't have a flair for the dramatics or no style, think about it. The one finger up, he basically dropped the mic. And you think about the three-point shooting contest today, the hype around it is because of what Larry Bird did. He brought the excitement back for that, and he showed the true art of shooting the three.
I agree. I think that he had a lot of white boy swag, but it is what it is. That was a very nice feature. Peace.